We're going to go through a series of photos on a landscape bed that I put in a front yard. And we're going to primarily focus on some quick bed prep, the plastic edging that we're going to use, which is probably the most economical. And then we'll also quickly look at a weed barrier that we used, a couple plants that we put in, and then the rock that we use as a top dressing. Let's go ahead and go right into it here. I like to lay out a garden hose on most of the beds that I put in. It really helps you define and visualize where exactly that bed's going to end up, especially if I'm helping a customer. I can lay out that hose and show them exactly what it's going to look like so they sign off on it. First step, we've already killed it off with a weed and grass killer. I like to do that and I use them sparingly, but I do it because I don't want to haul out all that sod and then bring in new soils. So it just takes away that step of a lot of extra cost and a lot of extra work. So first step, we've got a nice flat spade here that we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the outer edge all the way around. Just do 5 inches down, work your way along all the way around. Next step, I actually come in about 12 inches, same thing. Work your way all the way around the bed. What you're going to end up doing is creating these little sod squares that are easy to work with. And we're just going to take them, slice in, and throw them right into the center of the project and start building some different little berms. I like using contouring whenever I can, where you get a little bit of elevation changes. I think it just adds a lot to a landscape bed when you're able to do a little bit of contouring, different elevation changes, and it avoids the expense of getting rid of all that dirt or all that extra sod. So as we move along, you can see the berms are just up to you where you want to put them. Sometimes I'll offset them a little bit, sometimes I'll center them. So once you're done going all the way around, you've taken out those sod clumps, we're going to want to go through and we're going to want to clean up that edge with our shovel. You can see here, kind of rough. So we'll go all the way around now, and what we're shooting for, get a 90-degree vertical angle. So that edging is flat up against that side of that new trench. If you leave it jagged, you're going to get some air gaps behind where it meets up to the grass or the turf. So definitely recommend that 90-degree. We're also going to shoot for the depth of that edging, which typically is about 5 inch for the good commercial plastic edging. Okay, let's get into the black plastic edging. Definitely the most economical. You'll find this, depending on the grade or the quality that you're purchasing, anywhere between, I would say, 50 cents a foot up to $2 a foot. Now, what's the difference? The coiled up edging that you're going to find at the mass merchants typically is going to be a cheaper grade of plastic, going to break down more quickly. It's still probably going to last 10 years, but the ultraviolet light eventually can start breaking it down. So just keep that in mind depending on what's the longevity you're searching for. I like using the commercial 20-foot strips of edging. They're not coiled up, so they're not going to try to reflex into that curve that they've been put in. And it's just a heavier duty poly, probably going to last you 25 years or longer. Okay, you notice that little lip right there. We want that facing to the inside of the bed. When we put our soil back, our mulch back, that lip is going to help us hold down the edging. We're also going to drive some stakes through that we'll show you, and we use that lip to anchor that edging. But before we do the anchoring, we want to go ahead and I lay a strip of edging, either just one, moving it around, or I'll put a couple in. You want to make sure you've got the right height. And what you're shooting for, you want that roll top, as it's called, either flush or about 1 inch above the surface. Let's go ahead and hop outside real quick and take a look at some edging that's been in for quite some time now. If you take a look down here, yeah, this has been in about 7 years. So doing a nice job keeping that turf grass from coming into the mulch beds. And I use a lot of rock edging, but I don't always have it on hand, or I just want to finish a project. So you can see where we've got that edging coming up, and I just switched over to the black poly edging. Can always come in later and add some rock right up next to that edging, almost cover it up if I like. And since we're outdoors, I quick grab that shovel that we were looking at in the video, and you can see just how narrow and thin. This chrome is just one of my favorite metal surfaces to use, especially in a heavier type soil. Been tough to find this shovel. You can also use a heavy duty spade such as this. Sometimes you'll come across, you've got the flat spade ones. I like to use something with a taper or with a point. It just seems like you can have a lot easier time digging into the soil. But this is another shovel that would work quite well. This is out of AM Leonard. And if you take a look over here, you can't even see it anymore. See how that turf grass just coming up right over the top, but still doing its job, keeping it out of that mulch from rooting in. As we walk along here, you can see there it's exposed again and then kind of disappears, and that's what I'm usually looking for on that black plastic edging. I don't really want to see it. You know, it's unavoidable to completely hide it, because putting it too low, you'll end up with a problem where the barrier isn't doing its job anymore. If you do decide to go ahead and put that roll top just above the ground, you'll be able to see it, but it's going to last you even longer as far as that turf grass encroaching, because turf grass over time has a stolon and a rhizome, two roots that are going to layer in. That stolon, you start building up that turf over time. Again, it's a long process. You're talking, even upwards of 10 years sometimes before that turf grass would be able to come up over that roll top edging. Okay, so once you've got that proper height, you've got a nice 90-degree angle, go ahead and you're going to want to start anchoring down on just one of the ends. I'll start by anchoring at one end and work my way all the way around the whole project, trying to keep that back end tight up against that trench that you've dug. Once you finally come to the end where you're going to want to couple this together, right up here, we're going to put a stake about 12 inches on each side of that seam. That's where you're going to get a lot of expansion, contraction. So you want to make sure you hold that in quite well in those areas. And we're going to be using between 4 and 5 stakes per 20-foot section of edging. All right, you can see here, once we came to the end where we match up, I happen to use just my Felco pruners. I always have it on hand. It becomes a good utility scissors. I don't think the poly is, like a metal where you're going to dull that blade, but you can use a razor knife. You can use different utility scissors. Once you come up here, you know you've got your slack out. You're going to want to just overlap maybe a 1/4 inch, just a little bit longer. And then you grab your coupler, which should be included with your edging. Make sure you find out when you purchase your edging, whether it be at your garden center, your landscape supply store, your mass merchant. And the coupler is going to be longer. And again, that gives you a little room for that expansion, contraction, because that edging will move just a little bit over time. And if you take a look there, just a perfect cut, perfect seam. Final step, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to do those last 2 anchors to get that edging firmly in the location we want it. All right, so we've got the bed completely in. We've got our contours built with that sod, edging staked in all the way around. So we're ready for the next step. Now you can do plantings either before or after you put that weed barrier on. If it's a bigger plant, I like to go ahead and put it in before. It gives you the freedom of just throwing that soil anywhere you need to. Take a look here. You can certainly pull that rock back, add your shrubs after the fact. Our customer here just wanted 2 evergreens in the center. They were going to bring in petrified wood, some different things to add or accent into that bed. And there's enough room in there too. You can certainly do planting as well. The Technito arborvitae is what we're putting in. They've got a really fibrous root system. I've got different videos where we talk about cutting apart the root system like this. Got our hole all set. We're just going to go ahead and drop that in. Next step, before you go ahead and put that weed barrier on, you want to take some of the loose soil now that we've got either around the planting hole, what we threw up. It should be a little bit more chopped up by now because we've worked with it. And you want to throw some back over that lip and press it in with foot pressure. Still leaving, I would say you're going to want about 2.5, maybe 3 inches to catch that rock or mulch we spoke about. And there you go, we've got the plants in. That's just a little bit of a side angle view, one looking at it from the other end. And we've broken out our choice of weed barrier here is the black poly. Landscape fabrics are probably more common now. They do let water go through the entire surface. The landscape fabrics come in different grades. Again, you're talking about different qualities, how long they'll last. We chose black poly. I would recommend make sure you get 6 mil poly rather than 4 mil, just a little bit thicker. As we start working with this, putting rock on it, dumping the wheelbarrow, we're going to find out that wheelbarrow can puncture it if the poly isn't thick enough. So once you get it rolled out, unfold it, we're going to just anchor in on each end. And what we'll do is we'll bring it up and we'll cut an X or a circle and we'll drop it in over the top of that plant. Like that there. Now at first it's just, like I say, a jagged cut, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to just open that up a little bit more to allow that water to get in there when we water it. I've seen different people or landscapers, they bring that poly, the fabric, right up to the base of the trunk. I'm not a big fan of that. I've seen it done, but I don't think it really adds that much extra work if you get a few extra little weeds right in here. Now this is another case going back to that killing off that grass. If we decided we weren't going to kill off that grass, the moment you cut a hole in here, you're going to have that grass viable, and you're going to have a weed problem for many years, because turf grass is vigorous. It's hard to get under control. You can't always pull all the roots. And the poly's in place now. Around our 2 techniques, we're ready to put down our covering. I should mention also that you can use something called a sod staple, different ways to anchor the plastic in. Another way to avoid that step, just find some old brick pavers, a rock, anything heavy that you can hold the poly into place. Once your decorative rock or mulch goes in, you can certainly just pull out those objects. But the staples are quick, they're handy, they're relatively cheap. Once you're into putting in the rock, I like to start on the edges, and I'll actually roll that wheelbarrow across that rock, and it avoids just any punctures. So we'll work our way from the outside to the in as we dump that rock. We were pretty close to this project, so I went the old-fashioned way. We just quick shoveled it into a wheelbarrow. Pretty effortless if you're able to drop rock in. It's a whole different story if you've got that rock dumped on the ground and you're shoveling in. It definitely adds a more physical step to it. But we didn't break out the tractor on this one just because it was so close to the project. And so you can see we're working our rock up in towards the project, and we just work around the edges. Once you've got all the rock in, and we're shooting for about that 2 to 3 inch depth all the way around the whole project, we'll go ahead, we'll start cutting that poly away from the edging. And you want to remove as much as you can. I tend to kind of lift up on the poly as I go along with the scissors. So we'll pull up, cut along, and once you cut, it drops back in. On ones that it didn't drop back in, we'll take that shovel we started with, and we'll just do what we call tuck. You just tuck that poly in all the way around where anything's exposed. Just a nice way to neaten it up and get that final really clean look. And since we have to water the arborvitaes, and even if we didn't have plants in this bed, I like to wash it down. There's rock can come in really dusty, really dirty, and this just polishes it up, make the whole project look completely finished. So there's the finished project. Still plenty of room to go ahead and add in some different decor, maybe some different plants. But for us, we were just hired to go ahead and put in that edging, the rock, and just a couple plants, and one final view from that side. So there you have it, little landscaping 101, how to just put in a simple edging bed with rock. If you're looking to add some different types of edging, I'll go ahead and put a couple videos on screen here that you can take a look at where we added some fieldstone edging. Otherwise, that's the finished project. Thanks for watching Garden Hike. We'll see you again next video.